Guru Nation, welcome. There are lots of unconventional career paths in clinical research. We're going to get into that in depth during this podcast, during this episode. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. I'm trying to get to 100,000 subscribers, so we turned off ads for you, which is insane. But I do want to thank my sponsors, Creo and Inato, for allowing me to provide this ad-free experience. Creo and Inato actually are going to come up in this episode because those are what's called tech vendors, and the lines are getting blurred between tech vendors and actual service providers in the clinical research space, and also who can work at which company, because it's no longer important to know how to program something. That used to be like the main thing to work at a tech company is programming. Now it's actually real world applications, real world skill sets, and we're going to get into that and a whole lot more of just unconventional career paths in this industry. So whether you're brand new, whether you're experienced, it does not matter. And I hope you find something in here that's informative, educational, and maybe you can actually have some practical use. So roll the intro, Daniel. We're 1 month away from Save Our Sites conference. Merch will be rolling out soon. We got to talk to Brad, Daniel, because he's launched some exclusive merch for SOS. And so maybe we can sell some of that merch, on the YouTube channel. I got to talk to Brad about that. You and I got to talk to Brad about that. So stay tuned for merch. Again, it's ad-free experience. Okay. In clinical research, the traditional functions are, of course, coordinator, principal investigator, CRA, research nurse. These are like the conventional, like household job titles, right? Like household name job titles. Everyone understands what these roles are for the most part if you work in the space, or even if you're thinking about working in the space. But the whole fun part of clinical research, and honestly the part where you can benefit, is from the creative aspect. And the fact that we are in the middle of a technological revolution, and AI is just a part of that, soon to be maybe a large part of it, is in your benefit, because it's no longer, as I said in the intro, it's no longer required to understand how to program or even be technical at all to work at a tech vendor. So there are, and we're going to get into some of them, but there are like the ones that sponsor this program, Creo and Inato. Creo hires former coordinators to work. I interviewed Nikita on the channel. She's, I believe, now with Creo in charge of like customer outreach, something like that. My bad, Nikita, if I'm getting your job title wrong, but she worked at a site. So she has experience at the site level. I don't think she has much of like a technical expertise in like programming and things. That has become ubiquitous. AI can actually do that. What AI cannot replace is the on-the-job know-how of coordinator pain points, coordinator struggles. And then there's other vendors that do the same thing for CRAs, and that will value and place a value on CRA pain points and CRA workflows. And I think you can find, you watching and listening to this episode, you can find your niche if you play around with the gray areas, sort of. And this is what I wanted to do a video on, like kind of go in depth on the untapped potential of clinical research. So it doesn't matter what your background is in clinical research or what your aptitudes may be. There's a place for you in this space. And a lot of it's going to fall into the less conventional, like obviously everyone knows coordinator, PI, CRA, but did you know things like psychometric rater? Did you know about things like patient recruitment specialist? Did you know about things like I just said with Nikita as an example, community outreach specialist at a tech vendor? Probably not. But it boils down, like, these tech vendors are becoming huge stakeholders in this space. I think close to half of all research and development spending are actually go to technology vendors and tools. And a lot of these tools are what's quote unquote site centric, meaning let's put the research site first. Let's think about their pain points, what they would actually use, because at the end of the day, a research site, a research coordinator does not need another tech solution. What they need are just solutions, period, to help them do their job better. And this is coming from somebody who owns a research site, Yuma Clinical Trials. And I also advise for tech vendors. So SelectIQ is a AI tech vendor that I advise for as far as helping sites get medical records and identify patients quicker for studies. And then I also have my own startup called Patient Ace, which is a patient recruitment company. So I understand the tools very well. I understand the need for the tools, but I also understand the type of person that needs to work at these vendors do need to have an understanding of the site pain points. And most of the time, these vendors lack that real world understanding. If I had $1 for every time some tech vendor wanted to pick my brain about my pain points as a site owner, I would be a very wealthy person. And that's because they're placing a premium on these things, on understanding the pain points, because again, the technology and the execution of the actual tool is not the hard part. It's making a practical value out of it. That's the harder part. And this is where your career can step through. So let's start with consulting, because if you do a search for clinical research consultant online, you'll see titles like clinical strategy advisor, clinical operations consultant, and the long tail of these titles goes on forever. Just try it out. Go to Indeed or just go to Google and put clinical research consultant and see what you find. Like, these positions and many others similar to them with similar sounding names involve advising hospitals, large medical systems, biotech startups, or even pharma companies on best practices for trial design, on data management, compliance. Given the 15 to 20% increase in consultant postings over the last year, many professionals are pivoting to these advisory roles. I just talked about how I'm an advisor for a few startup companies. If you like this kind of stuff, if you enjoy problem solving and being on the cutting edge of like new solutions that could potentially work, and you obviously have some experience, because you can't just be a consultant and not have experience, right? But there's a lot of things happening in our industry, and if you are somebody that is familiar with and keeping up to date with the latest happenings in our space, you will know not just this AI and tech revolution and everything becoming site-centric and everything being about the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that sponsors are having for their studies as far as getting minority patients to enroll. But you'll also know that there's tremendous amount of private equity coming into our space, and there's a tremendous amount of consolidation at the site level. There was a tremendous amount of consolidation at the CRO level, but now there's a tremendous amount of consolidation at the site level. And because private equity wants to scale things at large, what they want to do is figure out the model. How do we bundle up a bunch of sites into a site network? How do we go from one site to replicating that same model at 5 sites to 20 sites to 100 sites? And the same thing is attempted to be done at large medical health systems. Like Brad Hightower is doing this. We mentioned Brad earlier on this show. He's one of the Save Our Sites co-founders. Brad Hightower is doing this without any private equity investment. He's doing it on his own. He started with one site in Oklahoma City. He partnered with the hospital system in Oklahoma City. He's got just about every specialist capability, every equipment that any sponsors may need. He integrated this into that hospital system in Oklahoma City, and now he's replicating the same exact model. I believe it's in Arkansas. Don't quote me on that. But Brad, if he ever wanted to, he could be a clinical operations consultant or a clinical strategy advisor. And I think maybe he does do that as well, but you'd have to ask him at Save Our Sites. But advising hospitals, advising biotechs, advising pharma companies on trial design, on data management, on compliance. 15 to 20% increase in consulting postings over the last year. So companies are moving away from, and I'm going to do another podcast on this, moving away from hiring full-time as much. If you remember when we came out of the COVID pandemic, everybody was hiring full-time. It was a hiring frenzy. Now, it's a little more uncharted territory, a little riskier. There's a lot of artificial intelligence and other technology tools that are providing a downward pressure on hiring, and global outsourcing as well, which was going to be the topic of my next video I'm going to do, to where consultants now maybe make more sense for companies to hire. And so if you're somebody with some experience, I would really consider being a consultant, because you're not the only one. 15 to 20% increase in consultant postings over the last year. So if you're watching this in the future, it's right now we're in early 2025. If you look at the last year, so from the beginning of 2024, there's been a 15 to 20% increase in consultant postings. The next unconventional career path, which is also huge for consultants, regulatory affairs. So this is for the FDA, for the EMA, for job postings for regulatory roles. This is a crucial field, ensuring that new therapies meet health authority guidelines. So here's some common titles you'll see online. Regulatory Affairs Manager, which sounds like a full-time job, and Regulatory Affairs Associate, which sounds like a full-time job. You can be a consultant and work for these companies as well, but if you're full-time, these are the two probably most common yet still unconventional roles. They often require a background in clinical trials and data interpretation, and you'll be helping companies navigate global regulations, prepare submissions, and respond to inquiries from the FDA and the EMA. Now, this is obviously not an entry-level role. There's friends of the SOS, like Robert Goldman, who will actually be speaking on a panel. He's done all this, and he's done this in the capacity of a full-time employee, study director, and as an advisor and part-time consultant. And he started out as a CRA. And in 10 short years, he's become regulatory affairs expert, basically. The next unconventional role is in the field of scientific communication. So this is where clinical research know-how is golden. And you might come across titles like medical communications specialist, scientific content writer, medical writer, which is slightly less unconventional, but still is. In these roles, you'll translate complex trial data into accessible language, creating journal articles, conference posters, patient brochures, even marketing materials for pharma or biotech. If you're a strong writer who loves making scientific information accessible, this is the field that you're going to get into that offers a creative outlet and impactful career path. And also, it leads well into the next one, which is patient recruitment. But you might have just listened to the medical writing and scientific communication and think, well, isn't AI going to do that well? Yes, AI already does that well. What they don't do well is connecting it to the real world needs of companies, the real world regulatory requirements of the sites, of the sponsors, and of the CROs. So you will still need, AI is just another tool. It's like a typewriter. It's like a computer. It doesn't take away the necessity for a human being to figure out how to put this into a real world scenario. Same exact thing with patient recruitment. I'm a patient recruitment startup co-founder with Patient Ace. Message me if you're interested in having it help you for your site. The technical aspects of creating a Facebook page so you can start running an ad, connecting it to Instagram for your site, putting a mobile chat on your website so you can have a 24/7 chat bot. Like, that's all ubiquitous. Anyone can do that. AI can do that. What's not ubiquitous is figuring out not only the regulatory and getting approvals for all the communications, but the process for how you communicate with a patient, and the kind of the sales process or onboarding process of getting a patient from being a lead, meaning someone who's potentially may join a study, to being randomized in a trial, and even further, completing the study. That is not outsourced yet. We cannot outsource those aspects. Those are partially due to coordinators, pre-screening specialists. So some of these roles are entry level. So I've talked many times about what I think the best entry level position in research, and it's really a secret, is patient recruitment. If you can approach research clinics in your area, and especially if you don't have experience, but even if you do have experience, you can actually connect more dots and help sites scratch more of their own itches with your expertise. But let's say you have no research experience in this case. You find 10 sites in your community. You go to all of them and say, hey, I've looked at your website. I see you have studies for obesity. You have studies for depression. You have studies for psoriasis. I've already identified a community outreach strategy for us. Let's go out and figure out how to do lunch and learns. Let's figure out how to get more patients enrolled in your study. If you approach 10 sites about this and you tell them all you want in exchange is to intern at their site because you want to be a coordinator one day, they're going to hire you on the spot. Maybe not all 10, but I've known enough anecdotal evidence now to support that this is a strategy. We're actually going to have at SOS someone named Alexis Reese come on, and she actually came through the CRC Academy, and this was exactly the way she approached sites. And now she's not only has a job at a site and been promoted to coordinator, I believe, but she's speaking at SOS panels. At some point, she has become the consultant, the advisor, even though she's a full-time employee. So there's patient engagement coordinators, there's patient recruitment project managers for some of the bigger companies, and again, some of the smaller sites, they're just administrators, pre-screeners, and recruiters and schedulers. So there's also tech companies that are transforming how clinical trials are conducted. I mentioned Patient Ace, which is one of mine. There's also other patient recruitment firms like 1N Health. They hire former site workers to help sponsors understand their needs better. We at Patient Ace have hired the two people that work for us have site experience as coordinators and as CRAs. So your experience in research is going to help you tremendously in your career through unconventional jobs like these ones I just mentioned. Now, I mentioned Creo and Nikita. Inato is another one. They're a sponsor. They help sites get studies for free. They earn their revenue from sponsors by connecting sites to sponsors and qualifying the sites. Inato's also building tools for sites, record retrieval tools, medical record retrieval tools. They're heavy in the feasibility space. They want to make sure, again, that they are site centric. And not only do Creo and Inato sponsor my podcast, they're also Save Our Sites sponsors. And there's dozens of companies like them that hire experienced researchers. Because if you're trying to convince researchers to use your product, you need to make sure that it's a good product that they would want to use. You will only know that if you, A, get enough feedback from your customers, but that's hard to do, and that's very risky to piss them off and have unhappy, unsatisfied customers. So the best way to do it is to hire the people that would use your product, which are coordinators, CRAs, feasibility analysts, things like that. Viva, same thing. Viva is probably the biggest tech vendor in our industry. They started out on the safety side with SUSAR reports and safety reporting requirements, and now they're into e-regulatory, and they have free e-regulatory systems, and they're working on all kinds of things. I don't work as closely with Viva anymore, but they used to be a sponsor of the podcast. I believe we will see them at Save Our Sites in some capacity as well. And again, the technical stuff, they got it figured out. What they want to hire are research specialists, and specifically to get more sites to use them, specifically to get more CROs to understand, more sponsors to understand the power of integrating tools and technologies. These are implementation specialists, for example. Creo has a role called implementation specialist. Inato has a role called site engagement manager. I talk to these people at my site, Yuma Clinical Trials. In the case of Creo, just today, we're connecting our patient ACE to Creo's patient portal because we want to make sure that the leads that we get at our site are automatically connected into Creo and not passively. We have to talk to implementation specialists at Creo in order to make sure that we're doing it properly and troubleshooting, and that's Creo's way to keep their customers happy and to be site-centric. Same thing with Inato. What's a site engagement manager? It's somebody who understands the needs of the site. You'll help refine software products. You'll help manage client relationships, client meaning sites or sponsors. You might train the sites on how to use the tools that track patient enrollment, e-source data, and overall trial progress. If you've got hands-on experience in trial operations, these companies value your frontline insights to improve their platforms. I'm telling you, Guru Nation, if you have experience in research, you are way more valuable, especially at the site or maybe monitoring level, than you think. I don't want you to become dependent on just one type of job. Oh, I'm a CRA, but no one's hiring. Well, you have CRA experience. What about being an implementation specialist at Viva or Creo or a site engagement manager at Inato or dozens of other roles that we can't possibly cover even in this video or podcast? Now, I did a video last time on the skill sets for success. No matter which of these pathways you choose, and I encourage you to explore with all of them in order to be on the cutting edge of trends. Like Wayne Gretzky says, don't go to where the puck is, go to where you think it's going. You have to be able to anticipate trends. And then you got to have some skills that we discussed last time in our podcast, but I'm going to bring up again just really quickly: critical thinking and problem solving, communication skills, adaptability and resilience, for example, handling protocol amendments, enrollment delays, shifting regulations. If you are to work at one of these companies and you created, let's say you invested millions into a product that's going to make it really easy for sites to obtain medical records, for example, and no site is using it, you got to figure out why. What's the trouble point? Obviously, if it was that good of a product, the sites would be using it. So why are they not using it? Oh, well, when you look under the hood, there's integration issues maybe between eClinicalWorks and the site interface, and no site wants to waste too much time troubleshooting, or maybe there's some institutional policies that restrain the site from being able to do that. So if you work at one of these vendors, you gotta figure out ways to pivot and make these things better. And at the end of the day, project management. Everything's project management these days. Whether you've led a clinical trial as a project manager, or analyzed data as a data coordinator, or ran a protocol as a coordinator, or managed multiple sites as a CRA, these abilities translate seamlessly into other roles within research, unconventional roles. There's even tech, finance, and beyond, and that's going to get into the next career path even beyond academia. The technology sector is expanding rapidly. What's decreasing rapidly, and this new administration with Trump and friends, it still remains to be seen if RFK gets nominated as head of Health and Human Services. But even if he doesn't, which I think he will, but even if he doesn't, there's going to be someone similar in his place. And they are looking at all public funding, scrutinizing. There's a hiring freeze, definitely a hiring freeze at these institutions. But the skill set you have developed at these places can translate seamlessly into the private sector, specifically if you've been in any role of finance. So financial analyst, not only will sites hire you, and especially now it's important to think when we're thinking about sites, it's not just your small mom and pop site like we have in Yuma. It's big private equity backed site networks. They would love to have people with financial backgrounds negotiating large budgets and contracts at scale, knowing what the sponsors want to see, what the institutions want to see, what the overhead policy, all these things are. AI can't do that. Looking for invoiceable items that maybe the sites are not having time tracking down. I actually think this is the Wild West open frontier still for tech to figure out ways for sites to collect on all their invoiceables easily without having to go through every contract and read what fell through the cracks. Creo does a fairly good job with their CTMS and invoicing system where it's like a one-click invoicing, but all this stuff still takes work. You have to set it all up. You have to know where everything's at. You have to understand what your contract says. These are full-time jobs, really. If you're going to do this at scale, it's a full-time job. There's also healthcare administrations. So if you worked at a academic center and you've been let go, now there's large health systems on the private side that are getting into research, or private equity rolling up a bunch of sites into networks. These are formerly hospital admin, leadership team, collaborating, coordinating research across large hospital systems. Like I said with Brad, some of these unconventional job titles that are out there are research program manager, clinical trials administrator. These are some that I found earlier today while preparing for this podcast. Here, you'll integrate research initiatives with broader institutional goals, manage budgets, oversee compliance, and collaborate with clinical teams to improve patient outcomes. Look, there's real world examples all the time, and I'm going to go through some of these real world examples with you right now. So let's look at a few examples of professionals who I already brought up a few. I brought up Brad. I brought up Nikita from Creo. I brought up Robert Goldman, but there's others. So Raj spent years managing data for oncology trials. I brought up Alexis, who's at SOS. Here's Raj. Spent years managing data for oncology trials at Academic Medical Center. Landed a role as a healthcare data scientist at a major tech startup, leveraging his domain expertise to train AI models. And if you're watching this and training AI models is done, the next big frontier is inference. And that doesn't look like it's going to be anytime soon close to being completed. If you don't know what AI inference means, take some time to Google it, understand the difference between AI training and AI inference. We live in the future, everybody. Next one is Marisol, a former clinical research associate, pivoted to implementation specialist at a tech vendor, helping research sites adopt eSource and streamline workflows. Creo is full of these kind of people. Inato is full of these kind of people. Viva is full of these kind of people. These are just some journeys that illustrate how the skills you develop in clinical research can directly unlock opportunity in a variety of sectors within research that are unconventional. So, in conclusion, right, I know this was a long video / podcast. We've just explored a range of unconventional yet thriving, and I think that needs to be underscored, thriving roles from consulting and regulatory affairs to patient recruitment, tech, finance, healthcare administrator. Across these fields, you'll find specific job titles like clinical research consultant, regulatory affairs specialist, medical writer, patient recruitment specialist, clinical solutions consultant, equity research associate. We didn't even get into DE&I. This stuff's important. Remember, your clinical background is a powerful launch pad. Whether you've honed skills in project management or anywhere else, hop onto places like Indeed, LinkedIn, come to conferences like SOS. Just see what the roles are. If you want a sneak peek at where the future is, just look at what the site networks are doing and what some of the more popular tech vendors, some of the most successful tech vendors are doing, like Creo, like Inato, and like some of the other ones I mentioned. Don't be dependent on any one specific job. Don't be dependent on any one specific skill set. You are a work in progress. As the industry evolves, so should you. Hopefully this video and podcast helps somebody out there. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Let me know if I missed anything in the comments. Good luck, Guru Nation. Bye-bye. Hey, if you guys like that kind of content, make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. Stay tuned for more videos.